We got to talk about the de-dollarization of the US dollar, right? And what I mean by that is that de-dollarization is happening right now in our country, right? First, let's go back a little bit farther. I remember one of the best times of my life was when we lived in a place called Arborwood in South Carolina. It was an apartment complex. And anytime my grandparents, anytime my uncle, anytime anybody came by the house, we'd be like, Uncle, we called him Uncle Bubba, give us $1. Big Daddy, give us $1. Please, because we knew the buying power of $1. You could take that dollar down to the corner store and fill a whole sack full of candy. And that was one of my best times in my life, is walking with the kids with $1 in your pocket, and you know you're going to walk home with a bag full of candy. Can't do that no more. Now laters were 5 cents. Lemon Heads was 25. And I think it was 15 cents at that time. Jolly Ranchers was 10 cents. So you can be careful and fill up a whole bag of candy, all right? But you can't do that no more because of a nasty word called inflation. But why does inflation exist? It shouldn't exist. We've been tricked to believe that inflation is just part of life. In our salary, we get an inflation raise. Well, that's, we really didn't get none. That's just how it is. Inflation is every year. They've tricked us to believe that that's just how it is. Inflation should not exist. And it started in 1971 when we left the gold standard completely. That's when massive inflation that we consider okay. So let's get into it. De-dollarization. So if you guys have been paying attention to what's been happening in the economy, is that Russia and China said they're going to drop the US dollar as a reserve currency or when they're doing business. And the media really hasn't put it on the news. A lot of people, the people in the know are talking about this is serious. This is 10 years ago, 15 years ago, this would have been an act of war. It was an act of war to not use the US dollar, right? And it would have been an act of war 10 or 15 years ago, but the United States is not as strong as we were before. So now they can get away with it, right? And everybody says they should have the right to use whatever dollar they want. And I agree in a way, in concept, yeah, they should. But the United States power since the Second World War, since we left the gold standard in 71, even more so, has been completely and utterly because of the US dollar. That's how we're able to put sanctions on countries. That's how we're able to make countries do whatever we want. That's how we're able to make our will happen all over the earth, is because most countries, the vast majority of countries on the planet, when they do business with other countries, have to settle in US dollars. Now, this has created an incredible amount of power for the US government. And it's a lot of our military might is based on that one fact, that the dollar is our superpower, and now Russia and China are threatening it. Saudi Arabia is thinking about it. Now, what does this mean? Now, the US dollar is not backed by nothing at all, right? It's just paper, really, but it's backed by power and trust in the US government. That's the reason why it has value. It's not backed by nothing. So the value is in the trust and the power of the US government. So if these countries ditch it, then the power is gone. It's worse. It goes back to being what it is, paper, right? So it's very dangerous what's happening now. And I'm telling you right now what I'm doing. I'm not keeping a lot of cash in the bank because I don't think inflation is going to go away soon. I don't care what they're doing with the interest rate. As I see these things happening around the world, I think we're going to have 10, 11% of interest rate for the next decade, right? So that means that cash in the bank is a liability. Now, you got to keep some for daily life or whatever like that. But man, I'm getting rid of everything, putting it into some assets. I'm keeping very little cash on hand. I'm going to invest any free cash in real estate, something, crypto, stocks and bonds. And I'm going to keep large sums of money out of the bank. If it's sitting there, inflation hits it over here, you just lost 10% of the value of your money, right? So a lot of countries are starting to look toward the Chinese Yuan. I hope I'm saying it right. Yuan, for settlements between Russia, Asia, Latin American countries. Now, this is very dangerous, right? Another thing I'm going to explain, right, before we get into the gold standard, is that the United States has a ridiculous debt. Billions and trillions of dollars. I don't know the exact number, but a lot of people say, oh man, the debt's going to hit us one day or whatever. But the thing you don't realize about the U.S. debt, it really don't matter. And you know how we put the screws on other countries? The way we do it is because we're able to tell them, hey man, that's like you in let's say You're in a neighborhood, right? You're a loan shark. Half the neighborhood owes you money. Well, you can call in the loan whenever you want. That means as long as these people owe you money, they got to do whatever you say until they pay the debt. So the United States loans out money to other countries, and we also take out loans. And until they pay that debt back, we owe them, right? Now, think about this situation. In what denomination are the debts in? If the whole world used the US dollar, everybody's debt's in US dollars. Now, if I'm another country, I can't create my own dollars, so I got to find a way to earn them. The United States can just print them up. You see how much power that gives you? Let's break it down a little bit more. Let's say me and you, I'm just saying somebody, one of you guys listening or whatever, you owed me some money and it was in Mondo dollars. It was in Tall Guy Tycoon dollars, right? Let's say that. Tall Guy Tycoon dollars. And I print them on my computer here and I have to stamp it with a stamp that I only have to make it legit. And I say, hey man, you owe me 100 Tall Guy Tycoon dollars. How you going to get the Tall Guy Tycoon? I'm the only one that prints them. So you got to do whatever I say. And look, man, clean my dishes. Here's a Tall Guy Tycoon dollars. Then you pay me back. Hey, go out and cut my grass. Here's 10 Tall Guy Tycoon dollars. You pay me back. But you owe me. And how you going to get them without doing something for me? Now, let's say I owe you in Tall Guy Tycoon dollars. I don't have to do nothing you say. I can print them up and send them over to you. It gives an incredible amount of power to the U.S. government. An incredible amount of power. Let me get this in. To the U.S. government because they're able to print those dollars up. An incredible amount of power, right? There's a few things I want to talk about the gold standard. So the U.S. dollars used to be backed by gold. So if I had a gold dollar, I would take that dollar to the bank and I would say, I want to exchange this dollar for silver or gold. And they would have to give me the equivalent in gold. That's how it was before 1933. And I'm going to tell you some scary stuff about gold. And this is why it's so important. This is why it's so important that, so dangerous, I should say, that China and other countries are thinking about dropping the US dollar. I'm going to tell you why it's dangerous right now. And it's very dangerous, very dangerous. Before 1973, I could turn in my dollars. Each dollar was backed by gold. There was zero inflation, none, no inflation at all. A dollar in 1900 bought you roughly the same in 1933. There was very little inflation up until that day, right? In 1933, they said Emergency Act. President Roosevelt said he has to take the U.S. a little bit off the gold. He's going to take the U.S. a little bit off the gold standard. But what he needs for everybody to do, Executive Order 6102 said that all U.S. citizens have to turn in their gold. If you got gold coins, you got gold necklace, you got a gold watch, the United States government needs your gold to shore up the reserves so they can print more money. Now, they would pay you for it in cash. And they set the price $35 an ounce, but they went with a bag to every single U.S. citizen in the house. Say you put this gold in this bag. If you don't put it in, you get 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, which in those days was like $200,000. The U.S. government went door to door and asked everybody, put the money, you got to put the gold in the bag. Like this song, throw it in the bag. We need all of your gold in the bag right now. Almost like a robbery, but they paying you for the gold at their price, right? Every U.S. citizen had to do this. Right. And then they shored up the reserves so they were able to print more money to help fight the Great Depression that was happening at the time. Right. So in the 1930s, that gold was turned into bricks, gold blocks, put at Fort Knox. And now U.S. can print more gold up. They let the auditors come in the 50s, late 40s, early 50s. Auditors came in, checked the gold. They drilled into it, make sure it was solid, tested the gold for purity. And they said there was enough gold there to back up the U.S. dollar. Right. Remember, this was in the 1950s, 1940, 1950. 1971, the gold standard in the United States. Nixon ordered a temporary suspension of gold in the U.S., of the gold standard in the U.S. Temporary. When the government says temporary, it's probably permanent. So what that means is that the government now does not have to link each dollar to gold. They can print up as much as they want based on the confidence in the power of the U.S. government, right? So now the government can print all the money they want. At 1971 on, massive inflation. The 70s were a period of massive inflation, crazy inflation, right? All the way to the 80s, it kind of came down in the 80s and 90s, right? 1974, they let a few senators come in and look at the gold. Only a few. They could only look, they couldn't touch, and they let them go. They closed Fort Knox, and nobody has been at Fort Knox to audit that gold since 1974. Not one person, nobody has been at Fort. Now look it up. I want you to look it up. Go to the Treasury website and say, when was the last time they checked that gold at Fort Knox? 1974, they let 4 or 5 senators and congressmen come in. They could look at the gold they couldn't touch, and nobody else was able to go in there. And from that point on, the dollar has been backed up by the power, the might, and the confidence in the U.S. government. So that gold may not even be there. So if the gold's not there, all we got is smoke and mirrors. So if these countries start dropping the U.S. dollar, the United States is done. Yeah, the gold may not be there. It could not be there. They wouldn't tell us anyway. It's going to be a world war. That's the only way this can resolve itself. This is the only way. If everybody drops the U.S. currency, and now all of a sudden they say the U.S., your debt is now owed in Chinese Yuan. Like, let's say, for example, now I printed up on Tall Guy Tycoon dollars. And that means anytime I want to pay my debt, I just print some more up and send it off. That's what the government does. But what if like Mark is in here? So I said, Mark, man, I owe you in Tall Guy Tycoon dollars. So I pay him in Tall Guy Tycoon dollars, right? And then one day Mark says, nah, from now on, it's in real dollars. Now all of a sudden my debt becomes real and I got to have the money. And I can't print up dollars anymore to solve my problems. That's a serious state. That's what most countries have to do. Pandemic. When economy was falling, when society was falling, the governments, the first thing they did is say, we're going to print up money and give it out to the people to stabilize, which I don't know if it was a bad or good decision. I'm not going to get into that. But it did seem to stabilize temporarily the society, economy. But imagine a state in which they couldn't have printed up the money. Where was they going to get the money from? Now we would have been in a worse position if they couldn't have handed out that money. They didn't have the tax money. They created that money out of nothing and passed it out. That's how we have inflation now. Now imagine a situation in which the government couldn't even do that. We would have had a horrible pandemic, much worse than we actually had. I believe in stocking up on food. Walmart has a tub of food that's for 4 people for 48 hours, and it's $20. One person, that's a whole week of food. 2 people, it's 4 days of food. So every time I go into Walmart, I buy. They last for 25 years in your house, and as long as it's not too hot or too cold in the room temperature. So I'm gonna let you guys go for the night. I appreciate you.